Ahoy! Today we're gonna make a tier list for Sphinx Baubles specifically and who uses it best. Sphinx Baubles, if you forgot or you haven't seen it, is the new item that unlocks up to 60% cooldown reduction. You normally level up your cooldown reduction to 40 through building usually 3 cooldown reduction items, and depending on what you're building. And then you get an additional 10% from this item, and then you have to build another 10% cooldown reduction to fully unlock the passive. Also, the moment you buy this, even before you unlock the 60% cooldown reduction, both your damage and healing output is decreased by 20%. This is very important because that means that damaging gods are usually not the best users for this item, simply because they lose so much damage in return for that cooldown reduction. Shoutouts to Anti-Villain on Twitter, who suggested this idea, and I thought it was really fun, so it's like, let's just do it right away. We're just gonna go through the list. I'm gonna try and keep this relatively quick, because I know otherwise, with the amount of gods we have now, this takes forever. And when there's more explanation necessary, I'll do it. So, Achilles, I would say, is probably not a great user. It is nice that he has his execute more often, and he has a little bit of CC, bit of utility, but I would say when it comes to warriors, when it comes to CC-focused characters, he's not really up there, because primarily you want to deal damage when you're playing Achilles. With Agni, even more so, I don't really see any reason to ever build this on Agni. Most of his utility is around his ultimate that already has a very short cooldown because you have 3 of them and you want to deal damage. AMC, similar situation. I don't think you would ever play AMC for utility. You want to have damage on any hunter, really. Aposh is interesting. Aposh used to be a dirty bubble user once upon a time. The problem with this item is it also reduces healing. I think there's like a tiny bit of super niche being stupid potential where you can kind of use this to just spam corpses all over and kind of abuse that. But generally speaking, he's also a very damage focused god, and taking that damage away, usually not a good idea. Amaterasu is someone where I'd say there's at least some benefit in it, having that ult more often especially, but also having the silence more often. For the one, it doesn't really matter that much. But I would say she's an okay user, maybe like B. So I would say like this is like still probably people wouldn't build. Now maybe more like C, but more like better than Achilles. And her, if you were like to go super utility by like a hunter standard, he's probably not the worst, because you have like a fair bit of stuff, like more than other hunters I would say, but like only really if you were planning to play him in support. Really not a good user either. Anubis, if you're losing damage on Anubis, you're done. You have no benefit from that. Ao Kuang gets to execute more often as well, but other than that, damage loss on a guard that also does a lot of damage to his AAs and not his abilities, you're not going to get that much out of the cooldown reduction, so relatively low value. Aphrodite, I would say, is one of the okay users, but I don't know if I would rate her super highly. I would probably say like B tier, but like, you're losing healing on the healing guard. That's not really that great. Have 1 cooldown doesn't really matter much. Her 2, yeah, it's a little bit of a benefit. And obviously, having the ult more often can also be like somewhat game changing, but still, it's a heavy trade off for her. Apollo, not very ability based. You're losing too much damage on the other stuff. I guess like support Apollo, you can somehow justify that, but not really. Arachne, likewise, you're losing way too much. Now Ares, probably also an okay user. I don't know how exactly it works with the chains. Obviously, this is all speculation. I haven't played every single god with this item yet and tested every single god, but I would say overall, there is some potential, and having the ult more often is also big because it's such a big teamfight ultimate. Problem is you're gonna like run into issues with your blink cooldown at some point, but I think there's still some value. Artemis, I would say among hunters, is probably like the best option because she can actually be played as a support as well. If you go like super utility focused, is it gonna be good? I mean, it's somewhat similar to Ares, I suppose. Like in terms of overall users of this item, I wouldn't say she's particularly great. In terms of hunters, she is probably pretty much the only one there's any reason to consider this item at all. So yeah. Artio. Now, Artio is probably not bad for this. The thing that I have with Artio is that you have so many abilities to go through, and the cooldowns are already relatively short that like you stand stopping and rotating on 40% cooldown reduction so much already that you're not really getting that much extra benefit out of the cooldown reduction. So I don't really know. And losing the extra healing as well I don't really know how often you could really benefit from it. I would say it's like somewhere between like C, B. Definitely not like super high or anything, but solid, I would say. Athena. Now, Athena, I would say, is a pretty good user because a problem for Athena is that with her cooldown reductions in many team fights, she just runs out of things to do very quickly. And you can, like, you just kind of sit back because you don't have any additional cooldowns that you can use anymore. And this way they come back up a fair bit quicker. Problem is her ult isn't that impactful late game most of the time. You can't really use it that frequently. But I would say of the gods here, she's definitely one of the ones that can make somewhat effective use of it. The problem is more in her late game when you can actually reach this item just not being good enough to really get a massive benefit out of. Like, if you have like a super big, like super hard-hitting ultimate in late game, then obviously you get more value out of having a strong build that works well in late game, but not before that. So I'd probably put her in B. Otherwise, she would probably be in like A, but yeah, not that great. Not that bad, but she's just not a late game god. A Willish, I mean, if you play a super utility, just don't do that. It's just way too much damage lost. Baba Yaga, also a very damage heavy god. I don't really see any reason. Like, utility Baba Yaga was never really a thing as far as I'm aware, so no, probably not. Bacchus is interesting. Bacchus, technically, a very damage-focused Guardian. And when you take that away from him, his one doesn't really matter. Well, it doesn't matter much, but you get more knock-ups, and the knock-ups like aren't really DR'd hard, so that's pretty good. I don't know. Like, between the 2 CCs in his main kit and then some extra CC in his ultimate, yeah, I would probably say he's B tier. But again, the problem is that he would lose a lot of damage, and he is a very damage-focused support. But in terms of, you know, what's possible, I would say he's up there. Bakasura, really no reason at all. Baron Samdi. Baron Samdi is most certainly a very interesting god for this item. Now, he still loses some of the healing, but you still get the movement speed increase every single time. You get the root, you get more ults. The only thing that doesn't really benefit that much is the one. But yeah, if you get like a support Samdi, or even a solo Samdi, you're usually not that heavily into damage and more into utility and using that utility as often as possible. So I would say Samdi is probably an S tier god, actually. Like, if there's one god that I would say is most certainly good at using it in most situations, it's Samdi. And he generally builds a lot of cooldown reduction already. That's something you have to keep in mind. If your god is not building 40% cooldown reduction already and can easily fit that in their build, then it's going to be really rough for them to even reach that. Then, like, even with support Samdi, you'd have to watch out because, like, you're probably going to build Lonos and you're probably going to build Thebes, and then the rest you're basically stuffing cooldown reduction, which limits your build choices a lot. But when you can fit it in, I think it's very good. But Stat, no reason. Like, she loses too much damage and she's just a burst guard. Bellona, I also don't really see any reason. She's like too AA focused most of the time. You get a little bit of extra utility, but she's not really played as such. She's played more as a bully, as an aggressor in team fights. Kabrakan, I think, is among Guardians among the weaker ones because while he gets some extra CC, losing that damage, again, very big for him because he is played towards the more aggressive side of Guardians. So, yeah, I don't think there's much of a reason to build it on him when he's more of like a single combo god most of the time anyways. And then his job should be done. The target should be dead, and if he's not dead, then that was a problem. Camazotz, no reason. No utility, just loses damage. Cerberus, well, he's got his ult, but outside of that, I think his utility is also relatively limited. He's a very damage-focused, aggressive Guardian, so not much benefit. Other than that, Kanonas, I mean, the ults, it's nice for the ult, but you're never going to actually build that much CDR on Kanonas. You're throwing if you do it. Shark, kind of similar to Achilles, I guess. Yeah, like, you can justify it in some ways, but again, you're losing damage, and Shark is already struggling to keep his numbers impactful enough late game. It doesn't have that much CC outside of it to make up for it. Chang'e is the first one I actually tried today, and I gotta say, I expected more. I think she is okay with it because you're getting like a lot of cooldown reduction, especially on her one, so you can spam that. You can basically just go 1/3 basic attack with Baubles Hammer and it's reset. Like the combo's reset. And you're getting the damage immunity, which is very nice. What really hurts is giving up both the healing and the damage. So you have to play her very, very utility focused for this to be effective. Like you have to basically play her fully bruiser from the start and not be focused on damage, just be focused on being a nuisance. And not be focused on like keeping your team alive either. Like you're basically just spamming for as much cooldown reduction onto your ult as possible. Your other items have to align with that. I think then it can be decent at least. If you're not playing like that, if you're playing damage chunga, goes down to here, easy. So I'm actually like kind of between A and B, but I would say it's like compared to Aphrodite, she's got a bit more impact with it, especially with the ultimate being on such a short cooldown that you can like use it multiple times. Shadowbug, like marginally better than some of the other hunters technically, I guess, but again, I'd see a support Anhur over a support Shadowbug, so probably not any reason. Like maybe put him at the start of D or something. Chiron has a little bit more utility in his kit than some of the other hunters, but he also is someone who very heavily relies on his damage. I would probably also put him like towards the beginning of D, but very, very few situations where you'd actually consider building it. Chronos, you're never really gonna see a utility Chronos. It's crazy to have the ult on that short cooldown, but Chronos is again someone who wants to hit really heavy, and if you're not hitting heavy, you're not doing your job. Cthulhu is kind of interesting. I feel like the ult in itself, having a shorter cooldown, is such a big impact factor there that we can't quite put him in detail, but at the same time, it's a very damage-focused character. I guess he fits here with like Cerberus Chark, kind of, that level. Kukulin, so damage-heavy. It's like, well, he has some utility. He has the ultimate, so yeah, maybe between the two ults. But then the second ult already has such a short cooldown. I don't know. Somewhere around the same area as most of them. Cupid, among ADCs, probably a decent one, but keep in mind that he has to stack up his hard bomb every single time anyway, so having a super short cooldown on that means you're not getting the full benefit out of it. Your healing is also reduced, but the ultimate is a big impact also. I'll say like C tier. Like he's still slightly better than whatever else is down here. Daji, very, very torn there because she is someone who's super bursty and super assassin playstyle, so I don't really want to put her higher on this. You could technically argue for the ult alone, but I don't think the rest of the kit really works if you're doing less damage. So nah, I'm gonna put it in E. Danzaburo gets a C. Like, he's got a little bit of utility there, and that could be used effectively somehow. But again, super niche. Most hunters are just somewhere down here. Discordia, I would say, among the mages, is one of the more interesting ones because she has a fair bit of utility, and especially her 2 is very, very potent. And then you have that massive cooldown reduction from her 3. But you have to play her very unusually. You can't just like do a damage build and run this. You have to like be like a full bruiser Discordia that's just about surviving, annoying, constantly spamming abilities. But I think there's room for that. You know, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it's more like a C tier thing, but it's something that is worth trying out compared to most other mages. But more like an arena build than, say, a Conquest mid lane build, because you'd have to go bruiser, and usually that's not something that Discordia fits into in terms of laning and stuff. Erlang Shen, I'm not sure. I feel like he's got a little bit of utility here and there. He's got this 2 and 3. He can be playing support, and he's got his ultimate, of course. That's a bit of a difficult one for me. I haven't really played him since he was changed, so I can't really tell. I put him at the start of C, like with a bit of a question mark. Not entirely sure on this. Fafnir is interesting because Fafnir revolves so much around his ultimate. He is a damage heavy support, but I would say he's definitely like one of the more interesting ones, just because anything that reduces the ult cooldown that gets you into the ult more often is so valuable for him that losing some damage in return doesn't seem like the worst trade-off to me personally, just because you get that extra CC the moment you transform. Speaking of extra CC, among the assassins, Fenrir, definitely one of the better ones for this item because he already builds a lot of CDR to begin with, and he also can be played tankier than most other assassins, so he can get away with a lower damage build, and then you're just playing around using the CC from the one often, and especially your ultimate. Freya, no reason. Why would you? You're losing damage. Freya is all about that one-shot burst. If you're actually like, you're gimping your 2 and your kill potential during your 2 by using this, like, don't do it. Ganesh, I would say, is one of the most annoying potential guards for this item. Between his 2 and his 3 and his ultimate, like, all of these abilities are super disruptive in a fight, and all of them having a shorter cooldown. That's great. And damage, yeah, he has a big damage, big hypothetical damage in his ult, but that's something you'd be willing to give up on Ganesh more than on other guards. You're not getting kills anyway, so hey. And likewise, Geb. The shield is unaffected, so really, if you can ever fit this in on Geb, why would you not, you know? You get your CCs more often, and you get your shield more often. Like, it's a no-brainer almost. Like, I don't even need to explain it. Geb is kind of made for this item, I feel. When you, among the okay ones, I would put him here with Erlang. The big problem is that his healing gets reduced, and when your healing gets reduced on Guan Yu, that's kind of a pretty heavy blow. Hachiman, it doesn't really have utility. He loses damage, no point. Hades has a bit of utility. Hades also has a bit of healing, and obviously the ultimate is a big one. So I would say put him here maybe. I think when you can like abuse that ultimate effectively, that's great. And like he has a relatively short combo, so having that more often in a fight also be pretty decent, but obviously damage healing loss both hit him fairly hard. Habois is one that like you look at him and you're like, okay, that's great because of his 1. Like the cooldown reduction is fantastic because you can just spam his 1 over and over and over. And that's true. But you're also spamming the 1 with reduced damage. And Habois with reduced damage, not being able to combo people with like a 3-1 ult combo or whatever you want to do, feels very bad. But then he also has utility in his 3 and his 2, which is pretty big for a mage. So maybe I'll put him towards like the end of B. Like it's difficult. It's also like, it's kind of similar to Discordia where you kind of want to go like Bruiser to really make this effectively work, but then you also very low damage Habois, which feels very weird. But yeah, you know, many of the guards in here, like in B tier, are still not exactly great for this compared to the ones above it. Heimdall, I would say among ADCs, especially due to his ultimate, is probably one of the better ones, because like you're not gonna use the ult to damage in that case, but just to take enemies out for an extended duration. Like it happens in Pro League when Heimdall is used to just ult the enemy support. It's like I don't know if you just heard my cat. Hey, Leo. I would say it's like a Cupid level maybe, because otherwise like you'd really have to build like a support Heim almost to make it work. But it's not the worst one for it. And then Hell, it's just rough. Like Hell should be great, but Hell doesn't really have like she doesn't have an ult in that sense, like high impact ult. And also she loses healing, and Hell losing healing is probably even worse than Aphrodite losing healing. She doesn't really have utility in that sense. So I don't know. I can hardly put her in C. Like I would almost put her in D, but I think some people would not enjoy that. But yeah, like you're still getting the cleanses and the debuffs and stuff, so you're getting a little bit there, but really like what you want to have is as much hard CC as possible, and that is just something that is not really her specialty. Hera is kind of nice in so far that Argus is up more often, and this character kind of revolves around Argus. I don't actually know if Argus damage is also affected. I would assume it is. Usually like pets and stuff are also effective, so I don't see why this would be an outlier. But I will put her in C just in case. Like if Argus is not affected, she might be slightly better with it. And I mean, she still has a hard CC as well that is pretty effective. So, and she still has a shield. So she can probably be annoying with it. I should put her like up here. But it depends a lot on how exactly it works, and you would also kind of not be able to play on mid with that, but again, more like a bruiser playstyle in arena or something. Hercules. Hercules actually has a fair bit of utility. Probably like up here, maybe even B tier. I think just having the both of his CCs up more often could actually be worth like the trade-off for the damage. Wouldn't be the worst. Horus, similar as well. Loses healing. Kind of sucks for him. But he has a lot of CC. And having the ult more often could allow for a lot of control. So I think he's up here. Hu Yi. Like there's a very, very, very slim chance he could somehow play him with utility base and with the big ult. Kind of like Anhel level, but again. Only because he's an ADC, otherwise probably even lower. Hunbats. I mean, Hunbats is like here, I guess. Because Hunbats is really an old bot more than like Daji, for example. But it's rough. Like, it would be very rough to give up damage for that. But his ult is so strong that I think you could kind of like potentially consider it if the game really requires it or something. Most of the time, I would try and avoid it. I would try and get like 40% CDR and bombers or something, and that should be plenty for Hunbat. So, if at all avoidable, I wouldn't go that path on him, but I don't know. If there's just a game you just need the constant disruption, I would say there is potentially room for it, if your team has enough damage otherwise. He said, losing the damage, I mean, she's got some CC. Like, you know, she's got 2 good CCs. So I would say she just barely makes it here. Again, similar to the other mages, same explanation as with the Guardian stuff. But very barely. Izanami, no. Why? Just this damage. Janos has a fair bit of utility as well, especially with the ultimate. I would definitely put him up here. Maybe even higher, but it's just very weird, again, to play Janos without damage. Or with less damage, because he kind of relies on almost one-shotting people with his 2. Otherwise, when he's not a threat and he's just zooming around on his own, it's not really a problem. You can just kind of ignore him. Jingwei, no reason. Yomaganda, honestly, very little reason. He has like super low utility compared to many other guys. I'll put him like down here with the other damage guardians, but very little reason. Kali, absolutely not. Like, you're gimping your passive, basically. Why would you do that? Capri. Way up here. The ultimate being up more often. Potentially being up 2 times in a team fight. That's crazy. Having the grab more often in a team fight, that's crazy. The shred more often in a team fight, that's crazy. The root more often. Like, everything about him screams this item. So, yeah, that's great. King Arthur, again, a very damage-focused guardian. Has a little bit of utility, but not really enough to justify it. Kukulkan, a very, very damage-focused mage. I don't see any reason to ever build this on him, to be honest, compared to the slightly more utility-based one. Kumbhakana, can we get him up here? Kumbhakana is, yeah, potentially a damage guard if you build him full damage. That's also fun, but otherwise, all about disruption and keeping enemies annoyed and locked down as long as possible. And this can extend this chain even further, because by the time you're through with your rotation, your first ability is pretty much back up again. So, big one for this, 100%. Another one of those not damage-focused guardians. Kuzumbo, I want to like test around a bit with. I think it's very interesting. The downside with him is that he doesn't really have that much direct hard CC. He has his ultimate, he has his 3. But the fact that he also has Cooldown Reduction in his 2 means he can get his abilities so much more often that my main concern with him would probably be that you run out of mana. But you're just going to be spamming Nenes all the time. You can push people around very, very frequently in a fight. And I think that could still give you very good utility compared to lower rows. Yeah, I would actually, like, in this row even, I would put him before Chang'e. Loki, I guess, just barely here for the like utility annoyance factor and more frequent stealth. I bet people are going to build it 100%, but Loki losing 20% damage, it's pain. Medusa also, among the hunters, one of the more utility-focused ones. She could actually get away with it quite decently. I would say, like, in terms of hunters, she's probably actually here. Because you have the 3 and you have the ultimate. It's a little bit, but still, it's not Artemis levels, and it's not. Maybe we put it next to Anher. That's a nice spot. Mercury, if you play him super utility focused, I guess. But again, like with AA gods, like there's just no reason. Like if it's a CDR focused god like Hun Batz, it's much easier to implement it. With Mercury, you're just restructuring your entire build just to make it work. So maybe like top of D. Merlin, very damage focused god. I don't see any reason to do that. It's nice to have the ult more often, but you're just losing damage for it. Mulan, very tiny amount of utility here and there, I would say. Your ult could be pretty decent with it, but again, very damage focused. Neith, kind of similar to Cupid, I would say. She has a bit of utility here and there. Using the ult more often. Maybe I could almost justify her in B. Like if you're just really going for the ult, but then if you're going for an old CDR pen build, you're aiming to one-shot with the ult, so you don't want to take away the damage. It's somewhere between. Just put her next to Cupid. Kind of here. Nemesis, way too damage focused of a god. It's cool to have that ultimate on a shorter cooldown, I suppose. The shield on a shorter cooldown as well. Yeah, we give it C. Naja. Pretty interesting. I don't know if you could really make it work, but he can be played more like utility focused. And then you're just playing like, you know, the slow of the ring, the CC of the 3, the CC of the ultimate. You just take someone out of the fight. Could be interesting. At the same time, it's not something that you'd really want with a single target burst character. Nike is probably pretty decent, honestly, because she's not that damage focused. She's very utility focused. I would say she's at least around B tier here. Yeah, she has a fair bit of benefit out of this. I would actually put her like up B tier. Aphra's bad B tier, I would say, in comparison. Nox, also definitely one of the better mages to use this. Like, I'm thinking more along the lines of support Nox here, to be honest. Because if you're going for damage Nox or mid lane Nox, then you're still gonna suffer too much, especially from your ult not hitting as hard, your combo not hitting as hard. But if you're just about the annoyance factor, just rooting people, silencing them, having dashes more often, you can be pretty obnoxious. I would almost be tempted to put her here. Maybe. No, somewhere in between there. Nuwa, if you're losing the damage on your ult, you're an ult bot that does less damage. Great. Odin, definitely up there. I would say maybe like an A tier guard for it. Obviously, Odin is kind of damage focused, but his damage falls off so much in late game anyways that he becomes way more utility focused at that point. You still have reasonable CC in your main kit with the stun, and then obviously you have the big ultimate, and the ultimate in the matches where Odin is effective, where that ult is good, where he's getting picked, having that ultimate more frequently, multiple times in a fight is absolutely massive. So yeah, since you're only getting this in late game and Odin is not reliant on his damage in late game, I think that's a very good combination. Just get a mystical mail to offset the damage loss or something, I don't know. Oleron, his ult is so strong that for the ult alone you could almost justify it, but then you also lose everything else, so yeah, weird trade-off. Osiris, really not enough utility in his base kit. He's a bully. He doesn't want to lose damage ever. Pele, same thing. Like with assassins in general, I feel like you're almost never in a situation where you want to lose damage. Persephone, she doesn't have like that much CC comparatively. But I think the ultimate alone, I think I would put it like up here. The ultimate alone is such a high value ability that having that on a shorter cooldown could work if you can find a build to make it happen. But also super niche, super unlikely. Poseidon, very damage focused mage, no reason at all. Raging has like slight utility here and there, but not enough to consider. Ram, same thing, way too much damage focus. Ra, way too much damage focus. Brad Tosca, a little bit more utility. Probably here. Yeah, I would say so. That one hard CC in his main kit. It's not that easy to confirm either, so probably there. Raven, very damage heavy character. I guess like you could go like with these. There's like these stupid mitigation builds for Raven at this point that can kind of like you just live forever and just run around and CC people, I guess. that's what you want to do, and maybe there's some value in that, but it's limited, I would say. Scylla, you're not going to get your resets from your ult, you're just gimping yourself. Saket, I mean, she can be played somewhat utility, but you're losing the damage on your everything, so... like, Saket without damage is still rough. Like, the reason my support Saket worked so well for a long time is because her base damage values are good enough to still do damage without building damage. But if you're reducing the damage that you're still doing, then that kind of defeats the purpose, I feel. Set, such a damage-heavy god. No utility, no purpose. Skadi, nah, I mean the ice, I guess. But is that enough to justify anything other than the... Maybe. She can build cooldown, maybe it's like end of C, whatever. Sobek. Oh, we can finally go up a bit. Sobek, I would say, is probably at least solid A tier for this item. Tempted to almost go S tier. I think compared to the ones up here, Sobek is a little bit more reliant on his damage. He's obviously not the heavy utility Guardian out there, considering he still has a full damaging ability in the 3. The self-heal, and the 2 is also, you know, a very short disruption ability. But having more plucks, having more ults, still very, very good for him. So I would say definitely like towards the top end here. Sol, no, why would you? Very damage focused. Samu Kong has a little bit more utility. Probably like... yeah, I can chill like next to Erlang. That type of level. Depending on how supporty you're building him. Susano... Nah. He loses too much damage. Sylvanos... I can kind of justify it for the ultimate. And actually, he has a decent amount of CC. Just be aware, you're gonna heal less, and healing less with Sylvanos hurts. So that's a significant downside that you have to take into consideration if you're doing that. Same thing with Terra, I guess. Terra's ult is very impactful when played well. Maybe around here, I would say. She doesn't quite reach like Sylvanos levels because it's a little bit harder to make a kit work as effectively with heavy cooldown reduction, but somewhere around here. Thanatos has the upside of an execute and is ability based more than our Kwang is most of the time in most builds. It's very rough for him when you're going like out of the damage section, but you can actually play utility Thanatos to some degree. And if you have that high cooldown reduction, so you can actually frequently slow people, silence people, it's okay. Like this is two kind of faults out there, but obviously, and not having the same burst potential is rough. But having that execute up more often could be fairly good. Of the assassins, he's probably one of the ones who can make use of it. Like by assassin rankings, he's pretty high. Morgan, the big problem is that she really has like her one burst combo, and her cooldown on her ult is reliant on her enemy's cooldown, so you're not actually gonna reduce that further. So I don't think there's any benefit, unless I'm overlooking something. I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think there's not any way you can effectively avoid the enemy cooldown. Thor, similar boat to Thanatos, actually has a fair bit of utility. Still has 2 damaging abilities, obviously, but having the wall and the ult, in terms of assassins, definitely not the worst. Thoth, very damage focused, straight up no. Tyr is a god that was already frequently built with a ton of cooldown reduction. And he's very, very utility focused. So, I mean, in between he was also built with a ton of movement speed. That people would trade movement speed for, like, damage for movement speed. That's, you know, how valued that was on him. Just to get into position for his setups. I do think there's actually room for Tyr to be S tier, because he doesn't have to have that damage. If you can just push enemies frequently during a fight, like push an enemy into your team, but then also push enemies around multiple times during a team fight, I think that's pretty big. Like somewhere between S and A, I would say. Definitely a big winner for this item, especially in late game. And he already builds 40% CDR. Uller, when we're looking at hunters, probably one of the better ones just because he uses CDR so well, but he uses the CDR to burst. And if you can't use the burst from the CDR, he doesn't have a big ult either, then There's barely anything you get out of it. Like, you get your one stun combo, and then what? Because your stun combo is not... Probably... No, I'm probably actually going to put it in detail. Like, yeah, you get your stun, but what are you going to do with that? Like, you're not using your stun to set up for others. You're setting up for yourself, and then you're doing less damage. So, just play it yourself. Varman, very low utility. I'm kind of wondering if you could justify it for the ult, but then the ult also plays so much around being a threat while in the ult, and if you're not dealing damage in the ult, you're not going to be a threat, so I don't really think he has any reason to be anywhere else. Vulcan, very damage focused, no reason. Shibalanke, slight utility here, obviously, from the ultimate. Other than that, it doesn't really have, like, high scalings when you combine his other abilities. So he doesn't really have high CC when he uses other abilities, so there's not much he can get. So it's really just for the ult that he even gets C tier, otherwise he would straight up be D tier. Xingtian, I would say, is definitely one of the better users. Ultimate, obviously very strong, but also the two. Probably put it like in front of Ares around here. Could also maybe even be A tier, but like here. Like this, I don't know. Somewhere in this area. Similar boat. Yemoja. Now with Yemoja, like, I actually don't know how it works. I think she should be regenerating more Omi with higher CDR. As far as I understand it. This is one I'd have to test. Under the assumption that it functions, I would say she's at least A tier. The healing loss hits her, but she still has a shield. And there's this other item now that gives you shields for your allies when you heal them. So maybe just throw that in, but then I don't know if you can get enough CDR. She's definitely an interesting one. Like, this is a big question mark. I actually, like, temporarily place her here, and then I'll put her back down so people actually watch that part if they want to know about her. Because I'd have to verify how exactly it works on her. I think she could have pretty good potential with it compared to some others. Ymir is a relatively damage-focused support, I would say, but the wall is so strong that having that more often is, like, game-changing if you're good with Ymir. But then, like, you're not getting that much out of, like, the old cooldown, especially in the 2. I would say, like, around here. You're really just you're primarily using it for the wall and a little bit for the freeze, but it's good enough, but in terms of Guardians, it's not the best, I would say. Zeus, no reason. It's full damage. Shankui, nah, you're losing. Like, you're not that utility focused. You're losing too much damage again. He has to be a threat for his stuff to be effective. Tsukuyomi, yeah, I know you can get, like, the constant resets with just one, blah, blah, blah. But who cares when you're dealing damage? I don't think, like, there's not really that much CC in his kit. And, like, there is, but it slows. I'll give him the C tier for the fact that he can reset so often that he can just slow spam someone. But you'd have to make a very hard trade-off for an assassin to lose 20% damage. And especially if it's a single target burster. And his ultimate is also... The intent of his ultimate is to deal as much damage as possible on a target, and you're not really doing that. So, yeah. Very rough trade-off. Gilgamesh... Trying to see. I mean, barely C tier. No, actually, maybe like a little bit higher. I mean, he got the drop kick. If you can kick people in the wall more often, that could actually be decent. Yeah, no, that could actually be. That could be okay. It's not the best, not the worst though, especially because his ult's also very strong. Okay, now with these other ones, I'm gonna be a bit more careful because, like, I've played Morgan Le Fay. I mean, Morgan Le Fay is just damage. Like, you're not gonna do much. Tiamat. I'm trying to think if, like, there's some way you could effectively utilize. But her kit is still a lot about damage. You can kind of use it to, like, spam the minions down lanes and stuff. But at that point of the game where you can actually build it, see relatively limited value in it. Well, so I'm gonna, for all of these, I'm gonna just basically put a question mark. I'm gonna go through them, but I find that I haven't played these guts enough and don't have enough knowledge about them. So they're all the ones that came out after I took a long break that I would, like, confidently place them anywhere. Now, not that this these placements in particular, particularly confident placements, but I'd rather have them down here, talk about them, and whoever wants to hear it just skips to this part of the video. So Tiamat, I'm really not sure where you could effectively use it. I'm leaning somewhere between C and D. She has some utility. She has some CC here and there, but losing the damage just seems very rough. Probably more like a C tier guard, but yeah, somewhere around there. Atlas. I think Atlas actually has quite a fair bit of utility, as far as I'm aware. So it's got those grabs and stuff. Damage is a factor in his kit, but I would say... Yeah, I would say among the Guardians, he's probably one of the worst users of it, but not terrible. I think like maybe like a B tier type, but I may also be underestimating his CC in that regard. So yeah, not sure. Charybdis, I don't see any reason to build this on Charybdis. I think I can replace Charybdis pretty confidently. Like it's ADC, you're not gonna want to lose your damage. Like why would you? There's really no benefit to that. God, how do you even pronounce his name? The Jade Emperor. I would say, as far as I'm aware, his kit is very damage heavy. And based on that, I would probably say D tier. Unless I'm missing some major utility. I really haven't, like, of all gods, that's the one I know the least about. Clearna, also very, very damage heavy. I guess, like, there's some niche cases where you could benefit from the... Nah, probably not. She's probably a straight D tier like the other assassins. She's just about sneaking up on people and bursting them. Well, I mean, she's also played in solo. Maybe it's more effective there, blah, blah. It's lower tier, I would say. Lancelot, I don't really think there's much benefit, because Lancelot is also more about dealing a lot of damage and putting pressure on the enemy. And for him, it's actually pretty important to, like, be able to combo people until they're dead. And if that takes longer, it's usually not that good for him. Yeah, I don't think he would do much with that. Probably D tier. And Shiva. No. Another one where I know very, very little. And I would probably not think that he has much use for it. Maybe C or D. Again, I don't know. I don't really know enough about these guys to really make any more confident statements than that. All right, that looks like we actually made it through in a decent amount of time. Under an hour, that's okay. Obviously, up here, heavy utility, heavy impact ultimates in different forms, except here. But just being able to just constantly move people, lock people down, whatever. Here we see a similar picture. I'm actually thinking of putting Chang'e down a tier. But her true is nice, but I don't think she quite has what it takes to be an A tier guard. Looking at the other ones here, I think she's actually more like here. Then Nox is also not the top of this tier. Maybe she's on here, whatever. They're not really sorted, but this tier, these are the ones where, like, you can use this item in specific situations. If you have a specific build, if you're like going heavily into defense, going heavy into utility, not playing them in a damage focused style, then it could be effective or at least fun, or at least annoying for the enemy, depending on how the situation is going. And then the C tier guards are just more like, yeah, if you really want to, I guess this is where you could put it on. And then D tier is just, you lose too much damage, there's no reason to build it. You're just gimping your character's playstyle by doing this. Which is also the case for like some of the bottom picks of C that have like one specific edge case where this could be effective for fun. And then again with these ones, skip to wherever it is in the video that I talk about them, because I cannot confidently enough place them. And with Yemoja needs testing. Again, this is just based on what I know about these guards' kits and how I feel like they've worked in the past. Also, like obviously a little bit of influence from Omnipotence, but Omnipotence plays very differently because you don't have that damage reduction aspect. So that trade-off is not an issue, which makes, for example, Assassins way, way better with it because you have that higher cooldown reduction. and you no longer lose your damage, and you no longer lose the core identity of your character. Whereas with the current healers as well, obviously, the current version just gimps high damage dealers and healers heavily, and kind of restricts what they can do. So that kind of led me to this result. But it's all just speculation, and we'll see over time how much of it comes true, if there's any like niche picks that can somehow use it really effectively. Would be fun to see. With that, thank you guys very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell. And other than that, I hope to see you for the next one soon. SLOTH, out.